This week's Seder VaYishlach, we read how Yaakov Avinu, having taken his entire family across the ford of the Yabok river or stream, he returns for Pacham Getanim, for some small vessels that have been left behind. And there he encounters the Sarah Shel Esav, the angelic representative of Esav, and they wrestle effectively for the entire night. And when the Sarah Shel Esav realizes that there's no way that he can possibly best Yaakov Avinu, the pasuk tells us that Vayiga b'chaf yirecho, he knocks Yaakov Avinu by the socket, the ball socket of his thigh, Vateka kaf yerech Yaakov be'av kol imo, and something effectively occurred then, to the degree that when everything is completed and everything is concluded, and Yaakov has bested the angel, Yaakov is limping, and therefore, al kain lo yoklu b'nei Yisrael eskid hanasha, we no longer eat what we interpret to be the sciatica nerve, asher al kaf hayorach, that is to be found on the socket of the ball of the thigh, ad hayom hazeh, until this very day. Ki noga b'chaf yerach Yaakov b'gid hanasha. And Rashi explains that the gid hanasha, this sciatic nerve, is referred to as the gid hanasha. Why? Shenosha mimkomo v'Allah. Because this nerve evidently was dislodged from its place and hiked up, as it were, causing Yaakov Avinu to be in great distressful pain, causing him to limp. And to commemorate that limping, we no longer partake of this portion of a behemoth, of an animal. Now, I find it rather strange that simply because one of our ancestors was in a battle and was struck by the enemy and caused to limp, that for all of these generations, we no longer limp. So there's a pasuk in the Sedra of Miketz that tells us that when Yosef HaTzadik gave a name to his firstborn son, he calls him Menashe. Why? Explains the pasuk, Ki nashani Elokim es kol amali, because the Kadosh Baruch Hu has enabled me to be forgetful of all of my travails, the Eis Kol Beis Avi, all of my years spent in the prison, and all that occurred to me in the terrible, terrible battles that occurred between myself and my brothers as I was growing up in the house of Yaakov Avinu. And we know, explains Rav Nebensal, that forgetfulness at many a time is a fantastic bracha, because without the ability to forget, we'd always remembered the test that we failed. We'd always remembered the unkind words spoken within a context of an important relationship, that of a friendship, that of a neighbor, that of a coworker, that of a spouse, or our relationship between parents and children. It's important to be able to forget those things that pained us and hurt us, and to move on in life. For without that bracha of forgetfulness, we'd never be able to move forward. We'd never be able to put it behind us. We'd never be able to continue those important, significant, critical relationships that make us who we are and that give us ultimately our greatest blessings in life. But now, looking back at the struggle between Yaakov Avinu and the Sarah Shel Esav, I'd like to suggest that indeed the reason we are told that we no longer eat the sciatic nerve, we no longer eat this gid hanasha, was because something was forgotten. What was forgotten? Well, the psukim tell us the only reason in the first place that Yaakov Avinu struggled against the Sarah Shel Esav was because he came back having taken his family across the Maver Yabok, and we're told that when he came back, Vayivaser Yaakov levado, Yaakov Avinu remained on that side of the river for that short period of time in isolation, all alone. And thus the angel of Esav was able to sink his fangs into him. Where were all his sons? In a very short while later in the same Sedra, we will learn how Shimon and Levi took out an entire city of the male population of Shechem, single-handedly. Where were Shimon and Levi? Where were the rest of Yaakov Avinu's sons? Back alone, and effectively find himself in a scenario of great danger and in peril. And because they left their father alone, Al Cain, therefore, we no longer eat the gid hanasha. We no longer permit ourselves to eat something, a portion of the behema that I'm told is exceptionally delicious, but we're not deserving of it because we left our Father alone. And you know something? In truth, the only time a person limps is when he or she finds himself without support. The only time a Jew limps is when a Jew feels isolated and he doesn't have anyone by his side to give him succor, to give him chizuk, to tell him, you'll get through this because we will get through it with you. And you're never, ever alone. So when we find ourselves in a pandemic and people are isolated and alone, and even when there is no pandemic, when so many people effectively are alone, even if they live with others, but they feel themselves alone, it's ours to reach out to them and to never forget that when Yaakov Avinu was left alone, we as a nation suffered greatly. Have a wonderful Shabbos.